The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 3, Dragon and Slave. Chapter 32. The last hint of glow was gone from the western sky. Dracos moved across the ground like a golden shadow, quick and silent. A golden shadow that was rapidly fading to black as his pounding heart drove dark blood into his muscles and scales. A poet warrior of the Kada in full combat readiness. Jack had indeed never seen what a Kada warrior could do. He probably wouldn't see it now either. The hidden Brumgan watcher was just settling in a position when Dracos arrived at the hedge. Comfortably concealed, no doubt feeling quite pleased with himself, the guard was clearly not expecting any trouble. He didn't so much as squeak as Dracos knocked him cold. The hedge itself was still the tangled mess he'd found on his previous visits. But now that he didn't have to conceal his handiwork, the thorny branches retreated before his slashing claws like driftwood before an incoming wave. A few minutes' work, and he had a hole that even Fleck would find adequate. So far, it had been easy, simple tasks that even a raw Kada trainee could handle. Now came the tricky part. The breeze was coming steadily from the west. Crossing through the hedge, he swung wide to the east, downwind of whatever sentries and hidden guard posts the Brumgas had set up to watch the gaps in the hedge. He ran hard and open along the ground, sniffing the air as he went, trusting his now completely black scales to conceal him. So the glider had been built by Noy's parents. At least that explained why he detected the boy's scent at the site. Or did it? Because it was clear that no one had worked on the glider for quite some time. From the way Marilyn had talked, he'd had the impression Noy's parents had died at least a few months ago, which meant that whatever he'd smelled at the glider had gone through several months of wind, rain, nosy animals, and simple evaporation. Kada's senses were good, but they weren't that good. Not by a long throw. Not by several long throws. At least, not under normal circumstances. The odor of distant Brumga touched his snout and tongue, and he took a quick bearing that direction. There was a stone fountain several hundred yards away, probably where the guard was lurking. Mentally marking the spot for future reference, he continued on. For that matter, his sense of smell shouldn't be good enough for this task either. In fact, now that he thought about it, all his senses seemed to have been gradually improving over the past couple of months. The past 3 months, in fact. Ever since he'd teamed up with Jack. The question was, why? There was one rather unpleasant possibility. Ancient legend said that as a Kada approached death, his senses often sharpened dramatically. But that couldn't be it. Dracos had been very close to death aboard the Haven Seeker just before Jack showed up. He hadn't felt any dramatic surge in his hearing or smell then. At least, he didn't think so. For that matter, he felt perfectly fine right now. Better than he had in years, actually. Certainly nowhere near close to death. But there was also that strange incident back at the frying pan, where he'd somehow fallen off Jack's back and through the wall of their prison. Could Jack have been right about his human body somehow rejecting the Kada symbiont? Because if that were true, if humans could only serve as temporary hosts for Kada, then it was possible that Dracos was indeed near death right now. Nearer, perhaps, than any symptoms might show. But true or not, there was nothing he could do about it. And whatever the future held, right now he had some slaves to free. He had circled nearly to the mansion itself before he was confident that he'd marked all the hidden guards. There were 3 groups in concealed sentry posts, plus 4 other groups who had taken up positions behind flower gardens or trees or fountains. Most likely, those latter ones had been rushed in as backup troops in response to Jack's disappearance, which was fine with Dracos. Personally, he liked having enemies bunch up that way. It made them easier to find. And in this case, he even knew which direction they would be facing. Curving back along his circle, he approached the first of the hidden sentry posts, tucked away inside a cluster of tall bushes. Staying low to the ground, he crept up and delicately pushed one of the lower branches aside. The entire center part of the cluster had been cut away, leaving room for a cozy spy nest. 2 Brumgas were inside, sitting in front of a set of Argus monitors like the ones Jack had used during his own sentry duty with the Wynyard's Edge. The aliens were armed with both the standard slapsticks and long-range laser rifles. Cutting his way through the bushes would have been both slow and noisy. Easing himself back, Dracos crouched down and gave one last look around. Then, with a quick calculation of distance and angle, he jumped upward. The leap was right on point. His rear claws cleared the tops of the bushes by a fraction of an inch, and he dropped squarely on top of the 2 Brumgas. A quick double head slam later, and this post had been neutralized. He gave the monitors a quick check. No sign of Jack and his party yet. For a moment, he debated taking the sentry's laser rifles and hiding them where the escaping slaves could get a hold of them. But even with his brief military training, Jack wasn't a very good shot. The other slaves were likely to be even worse. It would be safer for everyone if Dracos did all the path-clearing work himself. The next obstacle in line was ahead and about 50 yards to the left. 2 guards crouched behind the rim of a stone fish pond. Leaping back out of the bushes, he headed in that direction. He'd finished off that group and 3 others and was heading for the final 2 sentry posts when the sky to the northwest abruptly lit up like the inside of a strobe flash. He froze in place, sinking deeper into the grass. There was a faint glow in the direction now, reddish light flickering against the low clouds. Right on schedule, the glider had gone to its death. The only question now was whether it would succeed in the purpose they had set for it. Keeping low, he continued on toward his next target. The Brumgan response was faster than he had expected. He had just reached the concealed sentry post when he heard the distinctive sound of lifters from behind him. He ducked under the edge of the bushes just as a group of 6 Clax 7 patrol planes shot past, heading for the wall. The Clax 7s had reached their goal by the time Dracos finished with this latest group. One of the aircraft was visible just inside the wall, hovering guard around the burning glider. The others were out of sight, probably on the ground, with their crews examining the wreckage for bodies. There was 1 sentry post left, this one disguised as a large wooden equipment box at the back corner of the sports field, grandstand, beside the western flagpole. Dracos was running silently toward it when the sky again lit up with a flash of laser fire. His claws dug into the ground as he twisted around, fully expecting to see the hovering Clax 7 firing at Fleck or, worse, at Jack and the rest of the escaping slaves. To his surprise, though, it was the hovering air fighter itself that had been hit, trailing fiery smoke as it spun to the ground out of sight. And taking its place in the sky, only hovering just outside the wall instead of inside it, was the SNA. Dracos turned away, mentally shaking his head. Whatever he might think about Uncle Verge's ethics, the computerized personality definitely had a talent for making grand entrances. He reached the equipment box without incident. Slicing through the locking bar, he flung the door open. Once again, he'd caught the Brumgas with their backs to him. Once again, they never knew what hit them. The SNA was still firing as Dracos pushed the door closed behind him. Firing downward, he noticed, over the wall into the estate. Was he shooting at the other Clax 7s? But the laser blasts seemed to be low-powered ones, too weak for cutting through air fighter armor. Was he shooting at the Brumgan searchers, then? But there was far too much firing for that. Curiosity got the better of him. Climbing up the back of the grandstand, he jumped to the flagpole. It was made of metal, but the material was soft enough for his claws to handle. Digging in, he headed up. And from the very top, he could see that Uncle Verge wasn't shooting at either the Clax 7s or their crews. Instead, he was laying down a line of laser fire between the air fighters and the Brumgas, trapping them back against their own defense wall. "Clever!" Dracos murmured, mentally flicking his claws in admiration. In the same act, Uncle Verge had both created a diversion and neutralized a sizable portion of the enemy force, and he'd accomplished both without unnecessary killing. The escaping slaves were in sight now, a ragged line of people hurrying across the sports field in the direction of the house and the mercenary transports that would take them to their freedom. Shifting around on the flagpole, Dracos turned to look that direction. The transports were gone.